The age you were when your mother died is so important. It indicates what you were going through in your life. It determines your level of mental development and your level of emotional maturity. My mother, Marcia, who died at 42, so young. How old was your mom?
51 years old. I lost my mom at the age of 20 after a long battle with breast cancer. And it was during Christmas break, the day after Christmas.
So younger than you are now. You've passed her age. That's a huge transition.
Yes.
I also hear a lot of women who say, I never grieved my mother, or I didn't grieve her properly. My first question is, what did you expect your grief to look like?
Why do you think this is a grief we carry with us for so long? What are the long-term effects of losing a mother?
The grief that comes with losing your mother doesn't follow a timeline. And if you've ever wondered why it still catches you off guard, even decades later, this conversation will help you understand why. Hope Edelman is a leading grief expert and the best-selling author of 8 books, including Motherless Daughters. Today, she's explaining why grief evolves over a lifetime.
Most of us will only have the opportunity to have one mother in our lives, and she's irreplaceable.
Hi, friends. I am so glad you're here. Well, today's episode is going to be a very personal one. And you know, I do a lot of personal episodes, but this one in particular, because we are talking about the loss of a mother. I lost my mom when I was 20 years old. It was a long time ago, but that loss and that feeling of loss never goes away. So if you've been part of this community for any amount of time, you probably know my story. I lost my mom when I was 20 years old. She was 51 at the time. And at that time, I don't think I ever really understood anything about processing grief. I heard the stages of grief, but I didn't know very much. It wasn't until 3 years ago I picked up this book, Motherless Daughters by Hope Edelman, and it changed absolutely everything for me. So if your mother passed when you were younger, if your mother passed recently, or if your mother's getting older and you find yourself thinking a lot about that lately, this episode is going to be for you. And I want to say something. Hope's words have changed so many lives. I would love to hear what you think about this episode. Also, if you can, please leave a review. Let us know who else you would love to hear from, because it means so much to us and to this community to know what you're thinking. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. Well, Hope, it's so nice to see you.
It is lovely to be here, Tamsen. Thank you.
You know, I want to thank you for your work, first of all, because Motherless Daughters changed so much in me. You know, people that have been in this community know my story. I lost my mom at the age of 20 after a long battle with breast cancer. Yeah. And it's now been, I don't even know how, 30 years, maybe more. And I was not recommended this book until 3 years ago. And I also think it was because I had a hard time talking about it. So, and I think I realize now why maybe I wasn't recommended the book, because I didn't talk about it. So can you bring me to where this work started for you?
Sure. I was 17 years old when my mother died. Unlike your mom, my mother had a very brief and kind of vicious battle with breast cancer. She was diagnosed when I was 15. And she died 2 weeks after my 17th birthday. It was the summer between my junior and senior year in high school. And I didn't know any other girls who'd lost a mom other than my sister. So I went looking for books because I was a reader, and I couldn't find any for girls who had lost a mom. There weren't any at the time. There were books for adult women who'd lost mothers because that was more common.
Sure.
But those books all assumed I'd be in my 30s, my 40s, my 50s. Not 17. Mm-hmm. And I looked for that book for about 10 years and I never found it. And at that point, I was in a place in my life in a graduate writing program, and I was encouraged to write it myself. That's just how it came about.
It's incredible because when I think back, you know, it was 3 weeks after my 20th birthday, and it was during Christmas break, the day after Christmas. And so it's always interesting to me, like when I hear you tell, you know, your story and I hear mine, I hear that same order of, this is the age I was. This is who I was in my life and what happened. Why is it that we tell those stories kind of the same way?
So interesting. You know, I've worked with thousands of women who have lost mothers when they were young. And by far, like the most defining characteristic and the point on which they are looking for others to connect with is the age at time of loss.
Wow.
And that's because I believe developmentally, the age you were when your mother died is so important. It indicates what you were going through in your life, what developmental tasks you were facing. It determines your level of mental development, which means how much you could understand and often how much was told to you. or shared with you, and your level of emotional maturity, how much you could handle and how much you needed the other adults around you to show up for you and be there. So losing a mom at 6 is different than losing a mom at 17 in so many ways, which is also very different from losing her at 25.
When you lose a mother this young, and even when I say it at the age of 55 now, someone will say, I'm so sorry. And then I go, oh, it's okay. Because I don't know what to say. I don't know what it is. I've been like that my whole life. Do you find that? Do you find that you don't know how to respond to that? Or I guess you probably do know how to respond to that now, but.
By now I do, but I meet a lot of women who don't know what to say, because when someone says, I'm sorry, they are suddenly platforming their feelings. And we feel like we need to respond to that and take care of them by saying, it's okay, don't be upset. It was a long time ago. I'm okay now. Now when someone says, oh, I'm sorry, I say, me too.
You too?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I say me too. Because now I'm not sorry just for the 17-year-old. Well, I'm not sorry just for the adult that I am today only. I'm sorry for the 17-year-old who lost her mom, but I'm also sorry for my mother, Marcia, who died at 42. So young. How old was your mom?
50 years old.
So younger than you are now. You've passed her age. That's a huge transition.
Yes, yeah. She was 44 when she got sick, 51 when she died. Mm-hmm. And so that transition was very interesting, which I do want to talk about, because 50 didn't bother me at all. 51, I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened.
And I bet 52 was pretty weird too.
And 52 was really super weird. Yes. Everything was, I was like, it wasn't the normal transition of like, oh, you hit 50. So I spent a long time, and you probably hear this from so many women, you work with thousands and thousands of, I guess tens of thousands of women by now. Is there something that you commonly hear, whether the woman is now 20 or 30 or 40 or 50?
I hear that women never stop missing their mom and what she could have provided. Even women who are old enough now that their mothers are no longer likely to have been alive.
Sure.
I work with women in their 20s and 30s, all the way up to women in their 70s and 80s, and that's the same, no matter how old they are now. I also hear a lot of women who say, I never grieved my mother, or I didn't grieve her properly. Very common sentiment. And I always ask, my first question is, what did you expect your grief to look like? Because so many of us are expecting the Hollywood version.
Yes.
The tears, wailing, the crying, I
yes.
can't get out of bed in the morning because I feel so sad and depressed version, which is a way to visually represent grief, but it's not how everybody grieves. And it's often not how children or teenagers grieve. Not at all. In fact, there are so many different ways that grief can show up for a child or an adolescent. It can look like acting out in school, changing your friend group, getting a tattoo, listening to loud music. And so I say then, walk me through the first couple of weeks or months or even years after your mother died. Tell me what happened, what was going on in your life, were there any changes? And we'll almost always uncover some of the things like the ones I just listed.
Sure.
And then I will ask, what makes you think that's not a grief response? And women often feel so much relief when they think, oh, I did grieve my mother. It just didn't look the way the world expected it to look, because they often carry this sadness or this shame that if I didn't grieve my mom, did it mean I didn't love her properly? Which is not at all true. We show our grief in so many different ways, then and now.
When you go back and look at your 17-year-old self, because I look at my 20-year-old self and I would say, I went immediately from caretaking my mother to caretaking her mother, my grandmother. So I was able to take all of that and say, I don't have time for this because I've got to do something else. So I was very clear of that. And so your book, when it was recommended to me, 3 years, I think it was 3 years ago now, I went, oh my goodness, I see who I was, the traits that I have now that are still,
Sure.
what I went through. Did you go back and look at your 17-year-old self to see how you grieved or what you did?
Well, I think about that a lot because this was the era of grief has 5 stages.
Yes.
And as my mother was dying, a social worker in the hospital handed me a pamphlet called The 5 Stages of Grief.
Yeah.
And it was like a checklist. And that was good because I was an overachiever in high school. So I went down the list and I thought, check, 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 check. check. The day after my mother's funeral, I looked at that list and I thought, well, I'm at acceptance because we just had the funeral.
Wow.
And to not accept that would be in denial. And I'm past denial. I know she died. So I'm at acceptance. And
Wow.
yeah, so I didn't, I thought that I had finished grieving my mother at 17. And I look back now and my gosh, 17, even 20, that's a baby, isn't it?
Babies, right?
We still needed our moms so much. I thought I was so old. So a real wake-up call for me was when my daughters turned 17. I have 2 daughters who are now in their 20s. And I looked at them and I thought, wow, I thought I was so old and mature and I could handle this because the messages around me were, you need to get past it. You need to move on. You need to let go. And so I tried to do all those things. And I thought that I'd achieved them. But life later showed me that, no, this is a grief we carry with us forever.
Why do you think this is a grief we carry with us for so long? What are the long-term effects of losing a mother, whether it's an early age or whether you're 50 years old and you lost your mother? Because we're now going into this next part of our lives. I'm 55 years old and I see women that are, 2 of my friends lost their mother this year. And it was almost hard for me to go back and remember how I felt. Now I know how I will feel about my father, who's 86. But it was hard for me because I thought, oh, you had your mom all this time. You're so lucky. But that's not how they feel.
Not at all. No. In fact, I work with a lot of women who've lost mothers who died in their 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And it's just a different kind of hard.
Yeah.
We don't compare. There's no better. There's no worse. There's no easier. There's no harder. Losing a mom when you're 6 is devastating for the rest of your childhood. Having her in your life for 65 years and then her suddenly not being there is a very different kind of difficult.
Well, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking it could be so much harder because now you know that person. Like I go back and I think like I don't remember so much anymore.
Yeah.
Is that normal?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a human brain can only hold so many memories and we're building them all the time. So we do lose some that we have of our moms. And women often feel really sad about that. They wish they could hold on to more, especially the ones who were so young when their moms died that they can't remember her. Maybe they even lost her when they were pre-verbal. So they have to try to reconstruct an idea of who their mother was through photographs and documents and other people's memories because they don't have any of their own.
Do you think that the messages that we've had and probably still have about grief and loss and death, have they just been wrong all this time? I mean, you talked about the 5 stages of grief and I guess I hadn't heard about, I hadn't thought about it in a long time, but do those apply?
Well, I wouldn't say that they're wrong.
Yeah.
But we have seen grief theory change and evolve over the past 100 years.
Yeah.
And so what we assume to be right or correct now is likely to be modified and and changed in the next 20 or 30 years, perhaps. I wouldn't say the 5 stages of grief were wrong. They do apply under certain circumstances. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross developed them with patients who were dying. And that's a form of grief, to acknowledge that you're coming to the end of your own life. The patients that she observed went through denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. That's not necessarily true to the family members and the loved ones who were left behind, but we do often experience denial or bargaining and depression. We just don't necessarily do them in that kind of progressive lockstep order that ends with acceptance.
So you wrote this book when you were 27?
I wrote it when I may have started it at 27. It came out when I was 29.
It came out when you were 29. You were still a baby then.
Yes.
The reaction to this book, because it's very clear what it is when you read those 2 words, Motherless Daughters, the legacy of loss. What was the reaction to that book? You being really young, as I realize it now. What was the reaction to that and what you were able to handle?
Oh, that's such a good question, Tamsen. No one ever asks me that. It was kind of wild. So I'm 29 years old.
Yeah.
It's my first book.
Yeah.
My first media appearance, my first time on television ever was the Today Show with Katie Couric.
Oh my gosh.
I had no media training. I called a friend who was getting a master's in journalism to ask her what to wear. I mean, I didn't know anything. Yeah. So I went on the Today Show. I was living in New York City. By the time I got home, I didn't know to unlist my number. By the time I got home, we still had analog answering machines. It was entirely full. There was a huge response to that book. I was flooded with letters from readers because this was 1994. It was before the internet. We didn't have emails yet. Now all my communication is by email and DMs.
Sure.
But back then it was the mail writing to me, care of the publisher.
Sure.
I got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of letters from readers. And it was just like the floodgates were open. All these women of all ages who had been trained to self-silence. They had not spoken about their losses before because the culture didn't make room for it. Their families found it too painful. And they had internalized the message, this is something we don't talk about. So they didn't. And now they felt they had permission. So yeah, it was a pretty wild ride. And it was very, very busy for almost a decade.
I can imagine. There's some stories in here. Did they ask you, can we open it up a little bit and look at some of the stories in there?
Sure. The book opens with this letter from a woman in Minnesota who said, I'm sitting here alone on Mother's Day. I am 23 years old. My mother died almost 10 years ago. I was 13. There is an emptiness inside of me, a void that will never be filled. No one in your life will ever love you as your mother does. There is no love as pure, unconditional, and strong as a mother's love, and I will never be loved that way again. I think that speaks to your question earlier, which is, why is this loss different from all other losses? Because most of us will only have the opportunity to have one mother in our lives, and she's irreplaceable. Here's another woman in New York who wrote, do you ever get over it? Do you ever get on with your life? Yes, you do get on with your life, but it is always a part of your life, and it does affect everything you do. And then here's a woman in Texas who wrote, I lost my mother to cancer when I was 25 years old. She was diagnosed in April and died in July. Nothing prepared me for the pain or the depth of the loss. Everything you said about a lifetime of grieving is true, and everything you said about being mentally strong because there is no mother to help you is also true.
When motherless daughters find each other, and that's as a result of you in so many cases, because you have retreats, right?
I do, yes.
How long have you had retreats for women?
10 years. I just did number 30.
I love that.
About almost 600 women.
I'm going to be coming to one of these retreats,
I hope
right?
so.
As soon as I heard about them, I went, I think I've got to do that because it's always very hard for me to talk about, even now. When these women meet each other, what happens?
There's this instant moment of recognition. One woman described it as the alien finding the mothership. Oh. I just did a retreat last week in Connecticut, and this was the first one I did just for women 50 plus. There were 25 women sitting in a circle with myself and a co-facilitator, and it was incredible to see how quickly they bonded. By the end of dinner the first night, they said they felt that they had known each other for years.
What brings that bond? What is that? What is it that happens there, do you think?
I think it's that shared history. Mm-hmm. Partly the relief of being in a room where you don't feel like the odd woman out, the only one without a mom. Women who lose mothers when they're young often feel like all the other women they know learned something they didn't learn or got something they didn't get, and they feel different or even deficient in some way. I think it's the relief of sitting in a circle and knowing that everyone feels the same way and looking around and saying, she doesn't look deficient to me. She doesn't look different from anybody else, but she feels the same way I do. And they also share the same dark humor. So there's a lot of laughter at these retreats. Yeah. It's not, I mean, the women call it sad camp, but they're joking because there's a lot of laughter that happens there too.
Yeah, the dark humor only certain people can handle. You know, if I do it in front of people that haven't had a loss, I think they think I'm horrible. But I think that that's a way that we
lighten it up.
That's how we lighten things up. How do people find their way to your community? Because I have to imagine, and probably for myself too, I spent a long time in denial. I went straight from my mom dying to taking care of my grandmother, going back to college, and then starting my career. And I thought, okay, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years has gone by. I've got this. How do people find you if people are maybe 50 plus and maybe lost their mother years before? Maybe a lot had lost it in the 5-year period, but how do they find you?
So many different ways. And we ask, because I do weekly support group calls online and women can join in the first week of any month. And we always ask, how did you find us? Because we like to know.
Yeah.
Some find us on Instagram.
Yeah.
For some, it's word of mouth. Somebody recommends the book and then they look on Google to see what else is available. Sometimes a therapist recommends them, or they see something on television, or they hear a podcast like this one. So many different ways.
So I was reading in the book and it was talking about you having children. I never had children. And in some ways I think, and I've said this before, oh gosh, I did all the caretaking. I did caretaking for a very, very long time.
Yeah, that's common.
And I do believe that. Is that common? Because
Very
I don't know that
common.
I've talked to anybody about that.
Very common. In fact, I would say that in the support groups, the retreats I do, it's usually about 2/3 of the daughters there have children and about 1/3 don't.
Wow.
And some of them are childless by circumstance. They wish they could have, but they didn't meet a partner, or they struggled with infertility. But others made a conscious choice. They had to raise younger siblings, or they were caretaking for a father or a grandmother, as in your case, or they felt that maybe they couldn't do this without their moms. They felt that they didn't have the maternal instinct because they hadn't been raised by a mother. And so they made a choice not to have children. So we have a breakout room and an online chat, actually, in our online community called Childless by Circumstance or Choice, where women talk about this.
That's fascinating. So I didn't realize that was quite so common.
Oh, yeah, it's a thing.
And yet it doesn't surprise me. Now you had children. How did that change your mindset when you did that? Because you were younger than I was when your mother died. What was that like for you becoming a mother?
It was a kind of grief that, even though I was mentally expecting and prepared for, I think emotionally and somatically, I was not ready for what happened. And I don't know that I could have been in advance. It's a form of grief that I call new old grief, which is when an old loss shows up in your life in a completely new way. And that's what happened when my oldest daughter, my first child, was born. I thought I was mentally prepared. I thought, okay, there won't be a mom to help me. I'll set up help after she comes. I put together a team. I was in a mom's baby yoga group. And so all the moms had a play group together. I felt like I had good support. But really, nothing prepared me for bringing my daughter home and looking at her and the way that I missed my mom. Because I wasn't grieving at that moment just for me not having my mom there. I realized I'm also grieving for my daughter, who will never know her maternal grandmother.
Sure.
And now I'm grieving for my mother, who will never get to meet her first grandchild. Sorry, I'm getting old.
No, I understand.
It was really emotional because I felt like I'm grieving in 3 different directions and I'm full of postpartum hormones. This is not a good situation, which is, by the way, if any OBGYNs are listening or any pediatricians, really important for them to know that this kind of grief in a woman who's lost her mother looks a lot like postpartum depression, but it's different. Wow. And I've met quite a few women who've been diagnosed and treated for PPD when they said what I was experiencing was a surge of grief over missing my mom.
How do you know the difference? Is it because you're dealing with somebody who does not have a mother?
Pediatricians, OBGYNs, ask your patients, did you lose a mother when you were young? Or look at the medical records and see, and consider that as a possibility.
With all those years, I don't know, how old were you when you had your first daughter?
I was 33 when she was born.
So a few years after the book was already
Only
out?
a couple of years.
A couple of years after the book was out.
Ooh, 3 years.
But you'd been hearing all these stories, and now you're a mother yourself. What did you do? What did you do to get through that?
I reached out to other women I knew who didn't have mothers, and especially ones whose children were older. Yeah. And I said, tell me what you did. Tell me how you felt, just so that I didn't feel like I was going through it alone. And I wrote Motherless Mothers, which came out several years later after my second daughter was born, but it came out in 2006. But I really dove into the research on why this was different, and also to see how it might affect my parenting, because it did.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. How do you think your parenting is different than had your mother been alive?
I know that you had Kelly McDaniel on,
yes,
and she talked about mother hunger,
yes,
and how when you lose a mom, you lose access to the kind of protection and nurturance and guidance that a mother would provide. Well, there's a different kind of nurturing, protectance, and guidance that a grandmother provides to her daughter when a grandchild is born. And I missed that. And I think I had to find ways to get that kind of support. I think I was very insecure as a mom. I was looking for outside validation that I could do this, that I knew how to do it, that I could do it well.
Sure.
I felt like I was out to prove something to the world at times. I was probably a little more hypervigilant than other moms in some ways, because when you lose a mom young, you often become very focused on safety, on keeping yourself safe, on keeping those around you safe, so another loss doesn't come and take anyone by surprise.
Yes.
I think I was hypervigilant in some ways, and I think that I was a lot less vigilant in other ways. The things I cared about and prioritized were different from what some of my friends prioritized, but not so different from other women I knew who had lost mothers. And I think it showed up in also trying to be very, very clear about what's best for my child, what will help my child, and what will heal me, and staying on the right side of that line, because I always wanted to do what was best for my children.
Sure.
And so being aware and conscious of that.
Two things I get asked about more than almost anything else on this show is hair and skin in midlife. And they're two things I've been quietly working on with my own routine I'm excited to talk about. I've been using the iRestore Illumina face mask at night, and I love it. It's lightweight and cordless, and I can move around with it while I'm wearing it. 10 minutes a few times a week. It targets fine lines, dullness, and breakouts all at the same time. What makes this one different is that it uses red, infrared, and blue light simultaneously, not just one at a time, which means you're addressing anti-aging, collagen production, super important, and clearing skin all in one session. And the iRestore Elite for hair growth is something I think a lot of you might want to hear about. So many of us are dealing with thinning and shedding in midlife, and it doesn't get talked about enough. The Elite uses 300 lasers and 200 LEDs to help regrow thicker, healthier hair in as little as 3 months. iRestore is offering some huge discounts on the red light therapy devices. Right now, you can save on customer favorites like the iRestore Elite helmet and Illumina face mask. Just go to iRestore.com and use code Tamsen. That's code Tamsen at iRestore.com. Please support the Tamsen Show and tell them we sent you. Give your hair and skin the upgrade they deserve so you can feel confident and refreshed.
Is there something you understand, so many things probably, about losing a mother now versus when you were 17 years old? Was 17, were you trying to be hard and say, I got through this, I can do it myself, I'm independent, I don't need anybody else, to where you are today? Because the first thing you did when you realized, you were going through that grief is you reached out to somebody else. I didn't do that at 20.
Yeah. Well, I think sometimes I wish someone had told me at 17, this will be with you your whole life. You will miss your mom forever. It's okay. But honestly, I think if you'd told me that at 17, I would have said, get out of here. I don't want to hear that.
Yes,
I'm going to be
course.
different. That won't be true. But it would have been good to know that. I think in some ways, maybe I wouldn't have taken it in then, but I probably would have remembered it 10 or 20 years later and been grateful to have been told that. I do remember maybe 6 or 8 months after my mother died, my best friend, and let's cut her slack, she was 17 also. We didn't know anything about grief or psychology or growing up. But I was on the phone with her one night and I was crying, about my mom. I was missing her. And I think I was attributing something that was happening in my life, probably involving a boy at that age, to the fact that my mom had died. And she said to me, Hope, you've got to stop blaming every bad thing that happens in your life on the fact that your mother died. How much of your life do you think it's going to affect anyway? And I remember on the phone thinking, well, I don't know, actually, because it feels like a lot. But, now with the hindsight of, it's been more than 40 years. With the hindsight of 40 years, I look back and I think, well, it affected everything. How could it not? And it wasn't just my mother's death. It was everything that came after. And that is so true for anyone who loses a mom. I mean, the aftermath in your story involved caretaking, an elderly grandparent. Yeah. A lot of women, find that they have to take a lot of responsibility for themselves after a mom dies. Or a stepmother comes into the story very quickly. They have to adjust to that. Or the family moved and they had to change homes and neighborhoods and schools and friends, and so much changes in the aftermath. And that affects your life, your worldview, the choices you will make later. It really does affect everything. And I don't mean that in kind of a dramatic, overblown kind of way. I mean, it sets into motion a chain of events that leads you in a direction you wouldn't otherwise probably have gone in.
Oh,
and in
there's
that
no
respect,
question.
it affected my career choice. It affected how I met the man I married. And so my daughters exist because my mom died.
How did it affect meeting the person you married?
Well, I wrote a book.
Mm-hmm.
And then because of that book, I started a nonprofit that helped women form support groups. And my nonprofit needed office space in New York City. And I rented it from two guys who had their own company. And one of those guys and I started sharing cabs back to our respective homes after work. And then we started dating, we got married, and we had two daughters.
Wow.
So I wouldn't have met him if I hadn't written that book. And I wouldn't have written that book if my mom hadn't died.
Do you think about those things a lot? Because I do. I trace things back often.
Yeah. You know, I work with women a lot on that. Sometimes we map out their life stories. I also teach writing, and I help people write their stories and their stories of loss. And I often have women trace their plot points in their life, and they can see that, yeah, this was a terrible tragedy that my mom died so young and that I lost her and grew up without her. But because she died, this happened, and then that happened, which led to this, which led to that, which led to this thing in my life that's really wonderful, and I'm so grateful for and happy that I have. And then they often feel a rush of guilt, thinking, well, I would give it all up to have my mother back, or maybe I wouldn't give that up to have my mother back.
Wow.
And then I work with them and I say, you know, that's not a choice you ever have to make.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever going to give you that choice.
Yes.
Except, you know, in a time travel movie.
Right, right.
But in real life, the life that we're, you know, the life we are, the existence we all share now, you're not ever going to have to make that choice. So it's okay to feel grateful and happy that a tragedy led to some positive outcomes.
It's interesting that there's a lot of, and I'm thinking of women now that are my age, that are in their 50s, and that are losing their mothers, and they there's a lot of more guilt than I had because my mom was sick for a long time, and I didn't really have so much guilt. I guess my guilt was I didn't get to spend enough time with her, but that wasn't my fault. But I think a lot of women are in this sandwich generation where they're raising children, they're spending time in their relationships, or they're at the height of their career, and then they lose a mother and feel very, very guilty about time.
Yeah.
And I do think it could, I don't know if it's harder or not harder. It's all the same, I guess. But I do think about the fact if I'd known my mom for an extra 50 years,
Sure.
how much better I would know her and how much more of a loss that would be. I would feel.
Sure. Well, there's all the what ifs.
Sure.
We can't help, go through the litany of what ifs and how my life might be different if my mother had lived. It's all theoretical, of course, but it's natural for I think the human mind to wonder. Could I reframe something about guilt, though?
Yes.
Because I find that this helps a lot of the daughters that I work with.
You can do anything you want. This is your time. I brought you here so women can learn from you.
Well, it's the distinction between guilt and regret, because they're really two very different constructs. Mm-hmm. Guilt is often what we feel as a result of a choice we made, something we did or didn't do. Mm-hmm. And we often feel guilt when we've made a choice that's out of alignment with our own integrity and doesn't feel that it corresponds with who we know we are or believe we are or want to be. It's very much related to choices that we make or don't make. Regret is something different. Regret is a feeling we have when something happens that it's outside of our control, and we are hurt or unhappy with the outcome. So here's an example. I might be working with a daughter who's struggling with a lot of guilt because she got the phone call that her mom is dying and she didn't make it back in time because the plane was delayed or the flight was canceled. And she feels this terrible guilt that she wasn't there to say goodbye to her mom. Mm. But she had no control over that flight. She was not flying the plane. Really what she's feeling is deep regret that this series of events occurred and she couldn't be with her mother. Right. And sometimes being able to understand that distinction helps us understand, well, there's nothing I could have done to create a different outcome. It's not on me. But if she had said, I'd really rather do this other thing and I'll fly home tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And she feels guilty about the choice she made to not get back there in time. That's different. That's something we can work on and work through and parse out and unpack and help her with. But that is guilt because maybe she chose
That's
not to
different.
go. Very different.
I have to imagine the stories that you hear and the things that I think about too, because I think about I'm very independent because my mother died. I am very much a caretaker. I want to make sure everybody's okay all the time, constantly. And I'm extremely independent as a result of that. And I know you've heard that. I read this. I heard it over and over in women's stories. How do you work through that with women right now that feel that way, that feel like, oh gosh, I have this completely different personality, than maybe I would have had?
Well, first I try to assess if they feel that independence is an asset that helps them, or if they feel that there are times when it works against them and isn't serving them well anymore. Most of us became independent out of necessity, not out of choice.
100%.
I mean, some of us maybe were independent to begin with before our moms died. I don't really know if I was or not. I was so young. I mean, I was off with my friends a lot, but that's totally normal for a 15 and 16-year-old. So would I have been so independent if my mom hadn't died? I don't think so. I think I would have been more dependent on the family.
Me too.
But after my mom died, it was a bit of sink or swim. I mean, I did have a father and he did continue to raise us, but emotionally, he did not know how to connect with daughters. So I had to go look elsewhere for any kind of emotional affection or nurturing that I needed at that age. And I still very much needed it, especially when I went off to college. And so I became very emotionally independent, but I think I became kind of like my own little island. And that's not so good for me because I grew into an adult who didn't know how to ask for help. So if someone comes to me and says, my mom died and I'm very independent as a result, and I don't feel like it's helping me all the time, but I don't know how to ask for help. What we do is we take that cause and effect relationship that she's presented to me, which is my mother died and I became independent. And we pull it apart and we look at everything's in between. Well, my mom died and my dad was busy and didn't have time for me, or I didn't have a dad. And so I learned how to do this for myself. And then I had to do that. And these other things were not in place for me. And ultimately I became a person very independent, or there weren't any adults around me I could depend on or trust. So instead of being disappointed, I decided to do everything for myself. That might be a story for some of your listeners. And so we look at all those variables in between and we think, okay, instead of just going out and asking for help, which is a big step for people, let's look at all the things that happened in between. And are there some of things that didn't happen there when you were younger that we can introduce into your life now? Such as finding someone or identifying someone you can trust. And seeing what you might be able to ask that person for, who's likely to say yes. See what it feels like when you ask for help and someone says yes and you're not disappointed. Let's test it out there in some small way rather than asking for some big amount of help from someone where the outcome is unknown. And so we'll test it out in small ways, which helps them build confidence that, oh yeah, there are people out there who will show up for me. There are people who will help me. I can trust that will happen. And also build tolerance for, in some instances or situations where maybe someone has to say no, and it doesn't feel crushing, like a crushing disappointment. And we'll work on that so that then they can start asking for some bigger things later.
When you are working with these women, and you have people come from all ages of when they experience that loss, and they have other people in their family now that are older. And I know that there's a part in the book where you mention like some of the different characteristics of motherless daughters, and one being a fear of death, a fear of like loss all around them with anybody else now, and paying particular attention to that. And I was like, circle, that's me. Because I think about it all the time. And I've talked to therapists about it. And I said, I think about death all the time. Not mine. Somebody else's that I care about all the time.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't think that's uncommon when you've experienced a loss at a young age.
Yeah.
What do you do to work through that with women? Because I have to, when you've lost one parent, the last thing you want to do is think about losing another.
Well, in psychology, it's called perceived vulnerability. And in layperson's terms, it means a bad thing happened once. what will prevent a bad thing from happening again, even when it is so statistically improbable that it will happen. We all know people for whom tragedy occurs multiple times.
Sure.
We've already been vulnerable to one loss, one big loss, and maybe one we weren't expecting, especially if our mom died suddenly. So what's to keep it from happening again? So we organize our lives around trying to prevent that from happening again. That can look like controlling behaviors to other people. Really what it is an attempt to create safety for ourselves and others, because that was rocked when a mom died, right? Our sense of safety in the world, our trust that the people who love us will stay and not leave us was shattered. That assumption that the world is a benign place and bad things don't happen to bad people, shattered. So we have to, number one, I think, accept that sometimes random bad things do happen and build in ourselves this confidence that if it happens again, we will be able to survive it. To me, in this population, that's the definition of resilience, which is a word that gets thrown around a lot these days.
It does.
I think resilience means different things to different people and different things in different populations. But in this population, I really do think it means an awareness that random bad things can happen at any moment, and having the confidence that I will be able to survive it if it happens again.
What do you want other people to understand about women who have lost their mothers?
Our behaviors may look inexplicable to people who haven't experienced an early loss, but in that context, they're actually very predictable. Be patient with us, love us up, offer us help from time to time, help us learn how to receive it, and know that we're also exceptional humans because we get some very positive things out of early mother loss, and they're hard to see at first, but over time they reveal themselves. One is an incredibly deep empathy for anyone else who's suffering. We're often remarkable parents because we really are committed to giving our children what we didn't have or what we lost. And we know that aging is a privilege. In this circle I did last week, the retreat, all the women were 50 plus. We talked about how getting older is a gift because we were almost all of us in the years that our mothers didn't get to see. And we felt a strong drive and a commitment to make the most out of our lives because we knew that it could end at any moment and that it's a privilege to be here for our partners, for our friends, for our children, in this case, for our grandchildren. Some of the women in the circle had grandchildren. And so we try to squeeze a lot of good things out of life because many of us feel like we're living for two.
Oh, that's so true.
Do you feel that way?
Yes, of course I do. Yeah. That's why 50 didn't rock me at all. Everyone had black balloons and was scared of 50. And I thought 51 that was the age my mom died. She was 51 and a half.
Yeah.
And then 52, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a roadmap anymore. And do a lot of women feel like they don't have a roadmap anymore?
Absolutely. We call it crossing the silent threshold. Crossing the silent threshold because the culture does not acknowledge what a big deal it is to become older than your parent. Now, we're lucky when we become older than our parent, right? Our parent was, because that means we've lived longer and hopefully long, full lives. But some of the women I work with, their mom were in their 30s or their 40s when they died. Like I said, my mom was 42. So 41, I was anxious. I was worried I might get diagnosed with breast cancer at the same age as my mom. This is a same-sex parent loss fear. Health anxiety, very, very common. 42 was very weird because I thought, wow, it's like I was looking sideways at my mom.
Me too.
Like she's not older and wiser anymore. She like knows as much as I do. But 43 was the really funky year because I thought, wow, I'm older than my mom. And she can't be a role model for me in the years ahead anymore, even like she still could at 41. And I very much felt like I was stepping into uncharted territory. I couldn't ask her about raising children beyond a certain age. I couldn't ask her about menopause, about relationships later in life, female friendships and how they change, because she didn't have those experiences beyond a certain point. And so turning 50 for me was a celebration. I brought 15 of my female friends and their daughters, the ones who had daughters, on a big hike to Eagle Rock in Topanga Canyon.
Wow.
And we climbed to the very top of it and looked around, 360-degree view of the Santa Monica Mountains. And it was beautiful. My sister was there, my sister-in-law. It was a wonderful celebratory event. I will say 60 was a little weirder, but still a celebration, still
Sure.
an acknowledgement that I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, there's no question. So this show is not about menopause, but I talk about it in every conversation, I think, because one of the big things that I hear over and over definitely is, oh, my mother never talked to me about that.
Yeah.
Menopause, whether or not she's still living or she passed and they never had that conversation. Is menopause another pivotal point in a woman's life that is a motherless daughter?
Yes, it's a grief surge moment, and women don't know to expect that. But they will often, in the medical community, be asked questions about when your mom went through menopause, the same way that they might have been asked, what was your mom's pregnancy like or her labor? They're often asked, what was your mom's menopause like? At what age did your mother go through menopause? That was it.
Yeah.
That was the question I got, and I didn't know. So I asked my mom's sister, which was the closest that I could get. And then, of course, my sister could ask me, but I didn't have access to that information. And it just brought up another surge of sadness. Oh, because it was a reminder, not just that my mom's not here, but that she didn't get to live long enough to have that experience. We don't have shared experience. The experiences I'm having now are not experiences that I could have shared with my mom. She didn't get to have them after the age of 42.
I think what I love is the fact that you're bringing women together right now at all these different ages. So you have retreats. You just mentioned the retreat of 50 plus. Is there a reason in particular 50 plus is an interesting time? Is it because women are, people are living longer now. So women are having their mothers. My father's 86 years old. I feel like he's going to live forever. I know that's not the case, but I feel like he's going to live forever.
It was a random, happy accident. For the very first time, the first 12 women who signed up for the retreat were all 50 plus. It had never happened before. I did 29 retreats.
Right.
And there's an age distribution from 20s into 70s usually. And all 12 women who signed up were 50 plus. And my team and I looked at the spreadsheet and thought, this is really unusual and interesting. Let's go for it. And so we said, we opened up the next 13 spots just to women 50 plus. It filled up so fast.
Why do you think that is?
We didn't know how much women wanted to be with their age cohorts at this time in their lives.
Why do you think?
I think it's for two reasons. One is I think they are surrounded by people who say, your mom died so long ago and it's still affecting you.
Oh, I've heard that so many times.
Right? And so you're not over it yet. And so they wanted to be with other women who normalized that for them, who also were still missing their moms 30, 40, 50 years later. I think it's also that they're going through a time when they're starting to experience ageism and maybe feel a bit invisible to some younger people. They don't necessarily feel like they're being honored as the elders that they are. And they want to be with women that they can talk about that with. And so that circle provided that as well.
If there's one question or one comment I wish people would never, ever utter again, it's, how are you not past that? Your mom died so many years ago.
Yeah. Well, that's probably someone who hasn't lost their mother yet. Or if it is, it's someone who lost their mother at the end of a very long life. Because anyone who's lost a mother when they're young knows that it's something you carry with you forever. We don't get over it. We don't get past it. We don't let go. We find ways to carry her with us. And the thing that was really interesting about this 50 plus retreat was that most of the women there, not all, but most, had a disconnect in their inner relationship with their mom, because when they were young, they all grew up in the era of let's get past it, put it down. If you don't think about it, you won't be sad. This is something we don't discuss. And so they didn't have an opportunity to have an ongoing relationship with their mother's memory. No one would talk with them about her. They didn't hear stories about her. They may have become disconnected from her family. And so we do exercises that help them reconnect with their mothers so that they can have a relationship with her again and carry her forward. These were women who had decades of congested grief. That was also different about this group, and wonderful that they finally had a place where they felt they could talk about it with other women who understood.
Such a clear
congested grief. It just got stuck. It didn't have pathways for expression because they were growing up in a time or in families that didn't create pathways for them because they were being raised by adults who weren't told that they needed to do that.
Is that otherwise known as Gen X?
It's
yeah.
It's I'm Gen X, so it's Boomers, Gen X, and
some older millennials.
Yeah, and older millennials, but then again, it depends on your culture and your family. There are still children who are in those kinds of environments today.
If somebody says, "Well, I'm listening, but I didn't lose my mother, didn't die, but we don't have a relationship," is that the same type of grief?
It's not. I want to say it is grief for sure. It is grief. But I think of that as a different category of grief. Now, I have worked with women whose moms became incapacitated when they were young or institutionalized or were incarcerated and weren't there to mother them and then died later. And so that's very similar to a woman whose mother died when they were young. But if your mother was still alive, especially if she was still present in your life in some way, that's why I'm so grateful for Kelly McDaniel's work, because I say, Mother Hunger, there's a book for you. There are groups for you that will speak to your experience.
I wanted to just crawl up in her lap when she came.
Yeah.
She's just really amazing. Really, really amazing. After all of these years, what have Motherless Daughters taught you, Hope?
I think they've taught that 17-year-old girl who felt so isolated and alone that she's not abnormal, that there are others out there like her, that in fact, there's a whole category of normal for women who've lost mothers when they were young. And that's what I mean by the relief that I see on women's faces the very first night they sit in a circle or join a support group, even online. I can see them on the screen. I think it's healed that 17-year-old girl, and it's helped parts of her grow up that got stuck in the past. Because there is arrested development is real. Pieces of us do get stuck in the past. And one of the parts that inevitably gets stuck is the part of us that was in relationship with our mother when she was alive. My being a daughter to my mother in the physical world stopped when I was 17, even though the rest of me kept on growing up and moving on. And so that piece of me got stuck. And that's what I think is some of the most powerful part of this work, is that it's almost like shamanic soul retrieval work, going back and communicating with and nurturing that 17-year-old or that 20-year-old or that 12-year-old, asking her, what does she need? What is she waiting for that she didn't get? And giving it to her today, because really the best and only person that can do it is you as an adult. And so learning how to do that has made all the difference for me, and doing it in a community of women who understand it is a game changer.
Even if you are 80 years old, you're still grieving the mom loss.
And it's never too late to join a community of others who understand and do that kind of healing work. There are women who come in their 80s to our circles, and it is a joy to watch them open up and feel understood for the first time.
Hope, thank you so much. I was so looking forward to this interview.
Me
really,
too.
really was.
Thank you.
Where can people find you, or where can people find out about the retreats? And we'll list everything below too.
HopeEdelman.com. And then there's a link at the top for Motherless Daughters. Click on it and you'll find everything there.
You continue to change lives every single day. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Tamsen.
Thank you.